Hey guys, and welcome to Twixtor Training Tutorial Part 2. My name is Elliot Montello, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to use Twixtor Pro specifically, and how to actually use open and closed masks inside of your composition to help Twixtor Pro calculate the motion vectors and where pixels should be moving from frame to frame. That way you can get a really crisp, clear, slow motion without any warping in it whatsoever. So in this clip right here, it's a dancer called Bethany Rose Harrison, and it's a shot from mine and Danny Cook's new film that we've been working on, which has got some super slow motion shots in it. I used a couple of different techniques that I didn't discuss in the last tutorial, so we'll be going over those right now. This is essentially what you end up with. As you can see, there's a lot of tracking points, and actually, while I say tracking points, I'll just bring up a quick tutorial I came across online by a guy called Dennis Hummel from Dreamadgination Pictures. He does a fantastic tutorial on tracking points. It's very different to this one, but it's good for solid objects. Say if you wanted to film a bottle drop in super slow motion breaking or something like that. So I suggest you go check that out. I'll put a link below, and let's get on with this. What's happening here is the red mask that you see here is the second mask that's guiding the pixels exactly where to go. So every single one of these little dots here acts as a tracking marker, but it's all one solid mask. And if it didn't have these here, when the dancer's passing past these door frames and all these straight lines, they would tend to warp usually. But because I'm telling Twixtor where her body is and what she's passing in front of, i.e. this door here, it is able to make a much better guesstimation at whereabouts the pixels should be going. I'll explain more about this yellow mask in a second when we get into this. Right, so we're going to go and bring in our clip here. Just drag it straight into After Effects, same as you do in the last tutorial. If you haven't seen the last tutorial yet, I suggest you go and watch that so you understand why I'm converting this down to 24 frames a second. So once we've done that, we need to drop it into new timeline. Exactly the same as before, prep it exactly the same. You trim off exactly where you need your clip to start and end from, so you get rid of all the stuff before and after that you don't need. Trim it to the comparison. It's exactly the same setup as before. For when you're watching the first tutorial, just doing normal Twixtor. But once we get to this stage, this is where it gets a bit different. So we've pre-comped it. Set the footage up exactly the same, except this time what we're going to do is add Twixtor Pro. Go down to your revision plugins, pull up Twixtor Pro, and set in your frame rate input, so it's 24 frames for me. Okay, now what you need to do is understand what's going on. We can't just simply draw a mask around her body and tell Twixtor where she's going to be going, because once we've done the speed ramping, obviously it's going to be still referencing the original clip. So before you even start to play around with the speed, what you need to do is go in and make a mask. You need to rotate her from about here, or your subject, just before they're going to jump or flip or whatever it is they're going to be doing. Okay, so you need to rotate them all the way till they touch the floor again. Okay, so the mask is all done and animated nicely. So also what you need to do is make sure that your mask is set to none as opposed to add, which it will be on by default. So click it to none while you're doing your mask and leave it on there. Okay, so it's all animated to fit her body and follow the contours exactly. So now what you need to do is, if it's not already showing, you need to hit U to bring up all your keyframes. So that way you can click on the mask and press Ctrl D to duplicate the mask. Now, because masks are set as default to yellow, what we need to do is change the colour to a red, or anything that you can see just to distinguish the two masks. So that's red, the other one's yellow. Right, once you've done that, you need to forget about those two masks for now. As I said, you need to have watched the first tutorial, because this next bit is going to be exactly the same in the fact that I'm going to be running through the same steps as for how I speed ramped in the first one. So you set a keyframe at the beginning, you go to whereabouts you want her to slow down from, say here, you set another keyframe, then you go forward, you set the percentage of time you want, say 2, you go forward to where you want it to speed up again, then you set another keyframe, and then you go forward a little bit more, and you set it back up to 100. What we need to do next is go over to the effects controls window with Twixtor Pro in it, and click, if it's not already down, the main background layer settings. So what we're going to do here is tell Twixtor which masks to reference. So what you need to do is set your first mask, which is the yellow mask, so this is called mask 2 in this example, for the first mask layer. Okay, so first mask for background. And then the second one, which is called mask 3 here, for the last mask background. Now what this is doing is telling Twixtor before it slows down, it should be following mask 1. So in the point between going from normal speed to slow. And then when it's slow, it needs to be following the red mask, mask 3. And then when it speeds back up again, it needs to be following the yellow mask, mask 2. Now we have a problem here because at the moment both the masks are travelling at the same speed. And you can see that this mask carries on even when it's slow because we animated it to do that. What we need to do is go back to the first frame of slow motion, so it's that one there, and click on the red mask so all the points are highlighted, and just drag it up slightly. Now what you will see happen is that every time you go down a frame, the red one will keep trying to go back to where the yellow one was. So what you need to do is delete these keyframes. So now the red one will stay where it is and the yellow one will move. Now the yellow one needs to keep moving, and you don't need to touch that one anymore because that is telling Twixtor where the original source footage is going. Now the red one, you now need to move back down into position from where it was originally, so back down over here like this. Now the whole time that the clip is in slow motion, you need to tell the red mask where to go. So it doesn't actually change much from here to here, but what you're going to need to do is go in manually and change every point to fit again. So you can take a couple of points at once, move them down like that. Okay. The next step, after you've done both your masks, you've animated them to match the speed ramped version of your clip, is to look at things like the objects in the background, like this door. Now there's a tiny bit of warping on this door. There's no warping on the body because we've told Twixtor exactly where it needs to go, but things like the door in the background, which is obviously a square stationary object, it's still passing through that, so it's going to warp the door. So what you need to go in and do is exactly the same process, just with a solid mask that doesn't need to be animated. So you need to bring in another mask, change it to a different colour, and duplicate it. Change that to another colour. Now this one needs to be animated because this one, it needs to tell Twixtor that the foot is passing past the stationary object. So what we're going to go in and do is grab the pen tool and just put a couple of extra points in here. Hit M on the keyboard to bring up the mask path of the green mask to the second mask, and then hit the stopwatch and animate this section around the foot. So we'll bring this to here, like this, and start to animate forwards. Okay, now everything is nicely animated. It should look something a little bit like this. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. It's really knocked out almost 80% of any warping that you would get in there at all. Maybe more than that, say 85 to 90%. It looks, if you were to do this clip of Twixtor, it would not handle it. It would just really throw it off. So Twixtor Pro for complicated clips like this really works. I think it looks pretty good, but there's still a couple of little issues with it that we need to tweak, and I'm going to show you a couple of tips and tricks on how to fix those things. So now if you take your whole comp and render it out into a TIFF sequence, or dot mov, whatever you want to do, bring it back into After Effects, and I'll show you where to go from there to get rid of any more tiny bits of warping. Right, you're back inside of After Effects, you've just rendered out your clip, you've Twixtorized, you've brought it back in, made a new composition. Now, we just need to do the last little bits to it, so get rid of some of the minimal warping on there, because let's face it, if you're going to do something, you might as well try and make it perfect. So I'm going to show you how to do that with a really easy step. All you need to do is go back to the beginning where you've got a fresh, clean frame and duplicate that, okay? Now leave that alone for a sec, because of all the painstaking roto we did on this clip here with the red mask, because we've done that, you've now got a constant mask that you can just copy and paste onto the clip numerous times to add things in the foreground or the background without having to roto all over again. So all you need to do is copy and paste that mask onto this layer. So once you've done that, you then essentially have a mask that you can lay on top of anything. So as you can see here, what I've done is I've duplicated the clip numerous times and gone through and actually placed the dancer in just as a whole matte, sorry, like just a whole vector shape there, and then I also put in a little bit up here where there was some warping on the bar that was going across the top. This is the warping on the floor, so I've just masked this off here. That's the original background plate, and then that's her on top. So as you can see, the difference is only minimal, but it really does make a difference. And because you obviously have a mask around the whole dancer or your subject or whatever, the less you feather it, the sharper your image is going to look. So you can even make your image look a bit sharper and look more separated from the background than it was in the first place. Okay, a couple of other little things as well, is that if you're going to add in still frames, what you really need to do is add in an effect called film grain. Now you can either do this by going to noise and grain, and then what just happened there? By going to noise and grain and then add grain, or you can just over to Video Copilot and download the Video Copilot plugins, and there's a really great one called Fast Grain which you can add to it, because otherwise you've still got some artifacts going on in the original clip and some grain and stuff, but you won't do on your freeze frame, so it will look completely different and it will look really weird. So that's what you need to do. Anyway, after you've done that, you can pre-comp that layer and then take it in and add in some things, because like I said before, you can now add things in front of the dancer. So you can add in things like rays of light, particles of dust, anything, all because you had to spend that time in the first place rotoing her for the Twixtor. You should be able to take that to your advantage and use it. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm sorry it took so long for me to get it out. I think it's been 6 months, but it's because we've been working on a bunch of other projects, this being one of them, and I knew that we were going to have some slow motion shots in this film. So I just wanted to wait to bring it out with this rather than redo another tutorial with the fire and water. So I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps you. I'm sorry if it's really complicated, but any questions you have, just post them underneath the video. And go check out mine and Danny Cook's new film. Thanks a lot, and I'll catch you soon.